There's a big chance that what you've been told about sustaining or scaling your business is backwards, or the things that you're doing are wrong. Because we get taught to spend every ounce of our dollars, our time, and our money to get new clients, spend more ads, make new content, do more outreach, have more offers. And while you're doing that, the clients that you already have are deciding to leave. You just haven't noticed yet. The most expensive thing in everybody's business right now is not acquisition. It's the back door or the leak in the bucket that hasn't closed. And today I break it down. I give you a retention framework that changes that for you instantly. And so let's get into it right now. And if this show has ever helped you, or this episode's helped your business, could you please do me a favor and leave me a review, an honest one? I read them all. And it's the fastest way to help another entrepreneur find this show. Let's get into the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show from the home studio. Look, I got my bobblehead out if you're watching this. He's right there. I got my let up sign on the wall. I don't know why I've just felt called to record at home today and really recently, but I love that feeling of home. I love that feeling of I just want to be here. I just want to be in my space. I want to feel comfortable, which ironically, or maybe not so ironically, is what we're going to talk about today, which is retention. And so literally, if you're watching this, I have my notes in front of me because I'm being organized and I'm helping you with this. But most business owners, right, in the last couple of weeks, I have active private clients. We have the event coming up in April where all we're going to be talking about is retention. But we have agency owners, we have coaches, we have service providers, consultants tend to be a lot of my audience and a lot of my clients. And most people are still convinced that the way to scale is backwards. They're trying to pour money or gasoline into getting new clients, but yet they're bleeding all the ones out the back like a leaky bucket. And if you've ever heard me keynote, if you've ever heard me on a podcast, you've heard me say, and I just want you to write this down and I want you to remember this. You can't adopt any more children until you feed the ones that you have. And today we're actually going to tangibly and tactically fix that, because if you are listening to this in 2026, the market has shifted. I'm going to do an entire episode about how the market has shifted. But the market shifting doesn't mean the market doesn't work. It doesn't mean people aren't buying. It means what's required is different. And one of those things is today's episode, which is retention. And so the first thing is I'm practicing this and I'm working on this because I keep getting feedback from all of you. I never remind you to leave a review. I never remind you to share. If you know any other entrepreneur who doesn't know me, who hasn't listened to this podcast, that could benefit from keeping their clients, retaining more clients, and this episode could support them, please just hit pause and send it to them, okay? But today, I'm going to be breaking down retention probably in the next 20 minutes, okay? And I'm going to go pretty deep and I'm going to go pretty quick, but I want this to be something you can listen to today, turn around and go apply it into your business, okay? So number one is why is retention the foundation of scaling? That's number one. Number two, the common mistakes that I see that are absolutely killing your retention, which by turn kills your revenue and kills your ability to scale. And then number three is the 12-month drop-off map, right? What happens in a user's experience? Why people leave, when do they leave, and what it means. And so that's what I'm going to be breaking down for you today. And I think the first place is we always have to start with the why. Why is retention the foundation of scaling? Maybe you're not even interested in scaling. Maybe you're just interested in keeping your business the way it is. Well, why is the retention the foundation of that? We've all heard the adage in business. It's so much easier to keep a customer than it is to acquire a new one. It's 10 times more expensive to acquire a new one than it is to keep one that you have. There are so many levels and layers beneath why retention is the foundation of scaling. And I just want to give you some real world examples. If we owned a restaurant, we know that the core of our business wouldn't be just getting as many people to come once. It would be how many people can we get repeatedly to come back and make it their habit. If we owned a gym, we wouldn't want a ton of people who joined for 1 month and quit, and then we're constantly chasing new people. If you owned a coffee shop, You wouldn't want it to just be the fluke of like, oh, the first time I'm going somewhere else. We want repeat customers. We want repeat business because that's what leads to community. And so we know, and there's statistic galore. You have access to all the same data that I have, but we all know that acquiring new clients, new customers is somewhere in that range of 5 times more expensive than retaining a new one. But yet, if you look at the market, if you look at the things that were sold, if you look at the podcasts and the promotions that you constantly see, all you're hearing is like more leads, more leads, more leads, more leads. But nobody ever talks about what happens when those leads drip out the back. That's scaling backwards. Our obsession and the first approach I take with my clients is always, where are they leaking out and how can we keep the ones that we have? How can we activate the ones that we have so that when we do get more leads into that bucket, that they stick around? When we do bring more people in, that we have a better chance of retaining them, okay? Because when we think about retention drives a couple key indicators in the business. The first one and the obvious one is retention drives recurring revenue. If you have clients or coaching clients or customers with a physical product, is that once they bought, every time they buy or they buy again, you are increasing your recurring revenue. Second thing from a data perspective is it's increasing your average revenue per user. Third is retention stabilizes your calendar. It stabilizes your day. It stabilizes your capacity because to some degree, you get a semblance of stability and clarity with committed clients. And so when you are in that bucket, you're like not feast or famine, not back against the wall, not feeling like you're constantly running or rushing. And then another reason is it builds in referrals. When you have clients that stick around, when you have people that have been with you, and I think every single one of us listening to this right now can think of a client. We can think of a dream client, a dream customer, doesn't matter your product or service, where we're like, God, I love them. I talk to them. I know them. I developed a relationship with them over time because they were here for so long. And we love that. Like we genuinely love that. And then when we really think about it, we're like, God, they introduced me to this person and they introduced me to this person and they introduced me to this person. And so what retention does is retention creates a safety net to what I said at the beginning of this podcast, where it like feels like home. It is your home that you are opening up for other people. You're not forcing them to stay. They have the choice to stay. But when they do stay, it feels really good. And then they want to invite other people in because it feels good. And they feel like they have a friend. They feel like they have a teammate in their corner. They feel like they're achieving something. Okay. And so when all we do is stay focused on how can I acquire more? How can I acquire more? 9 out of 10 times, we have a leaky bucket problem. And we're not looking at the leaks in the bucket. We're looking at how do I keep pouring more water in? And then wondering why none of it ever sticks. So this is where we have to really understand that retention is the bucket. It's plugging the bucket. It's having a solid bucket. It's keeping people in the bucket. And listen, you can't plug every leak. But if there's a 10-inch hole in the bottom of your bucket, it doesn't matter how much water you pour in. You can send DMs, you can do phone calls, you can do webinars, you can sprint, you can record podcasts, you can launch offer after offer after offer. But none of it's going to matter because all of it's going to drain out the bottom. If you have a couple pinhole leaks that just feel impossible to do, but you're aware of them and you're constantly working on them, then no matter what, you're in the right way and you're in the right progress. Okay. And so now, if that's the foundation of scaling, right, that is what everybody here understands. I think we can all agree. If you don't agree, you might not want to listen to the rest of the podcast. You might be somewhere else. If you're like, nope, I'm just in an acquisition game, doesn't matter. I'm not for you. I am not your cup of tea. I promise you, I've yet to see a business that actually works that way, runs that way, or succeeds that way. Okay. So I'm going to lay out a couple of the big mistakes, and I'm going to make this really easy. I'm going to throw out 3 or 4 of them. So number 1 is weak onboarding, or what we call customer journey. Okay. Number 2 for me is mismatch expectations. Okay. Number 3 is silence between sessions or such touch points. And then if you're a coach or even a physical products brand, is number 4 is waiting too long between renewal conversations or reorders. Okay. So I'm going to start with, and I'm going to go completely out of order, but I'm going to start with mismatched expectations. Okay. This is probably the biggest one that I see. And most of the time it's unintentional. But when we think about how most people do marketing and how most people do business is we spend so much time courting, right? We are following up, we're getting on sales calls, we're sending emails, we're answering questions, we're sending proposals, we're helping them get clear so they can move forward with us and say yes. And then all of a sudden, we say yes, they become a client. And then when they get into our ecosystem, they're treated differently. We established a relationship. We established the foundation of what it's like to talk to us, to interact with us, to be in relationship with us. Then all of a sudden they say yes, and we naturally pull back. And most of the time it creates this unexpected or unspoken expectation. And there were I can't say that word today, mismatched or mix-matched expectations, right? And this is where communication comes in so heavily. And a lot of these other mistakes that I'm talking about solve this one, but it requires that we communicate openly, that we understand that when we are courting somebody, we are probably going to press. We are probably going to go hard. We're probably going to get on calls, but we have to be aware of that. I don't think anybody listening to this call is in the mismatched expectation. That is a tongue twister. Holy moly. You can all laugh at me. If you're looking at this on video, I'm looking at myself on my screen because I was just like, really, George? You can all laugh at me. Mismatch expectation. I don't think any of you are in this bucket where the mismatched expectation, it's the word of the year, where the misaligned expectations are that you promised somebody something and then you delivered something different, right? Little bait and switch. I don't think anybody listening to this does that intentionally, but that's the other part of misaligned expectations, okay? And so what that boils down to is that we communicate clearly, that we set expectations, that we let them know what it's going to be like. When they say yes, I'm like, okay, well, here's what it's going to shift into, okay? So that's number one. Number two, okay? Everybody needs to understand this. The first 7 to 14 days of a customer's onboarding dictates whether they stay or don't stay. This is where they make all of their decisions. Could be a physical product, could be a coaching program, could be a mastermind, could be if they're coming to an event, could be whatever you can think of. But in the first 2 weeks, the research shows that 87% of clients who had a positive onboarding experience remain active after 6 months. That's mind-blowing. Well, nearly 50% of new coaching clients drop off within the first 90 days if onboarding is weak. Now, let me make that clear. That doesn't have to do with content. It doesn't have to do with value. It doesn't have to do with the things that you're teaching them. It doesn't have to do with how good your course is or your coaching or your framework is. It has everything to do with what they're experiencing and feeling from a human to human, from a relationship perspective. This is why I obsess about customer journey, because that is the gap that customer journey fills. Because if you don't have a clear roadmap, if you don't have early wins, if you don't have connection points, and there is nothing but what we call the zone of doubt, that silent doubt leads into cancellation. So weak onboarding is not something that we set out to do intentionally. Most of the time it's accidental because we're focused so hard on the coaching sale or the transaction sale or the real estate sale or the enrollment sale that we forget that we accidentally make the entire process about the thing instead of how somebody feels underneath that thing and how somebody feels and how we communicate and how we lay out expectations is actually what dictates in that first 2 weeks what their decision is and if they stay and why they stay. It's not because of the information, it's because of the feelings. That's what customer journey actually is. This is why at the event in April, by the way, we have a couple tickets left. You got a month, April 23rd through 25th. We are spending the entire 3 days mapping out customer journey, the emotional experience, the positive touch points of it, the negative touch points, what's overlooked and how to fix it, how to remap it so that you never have a leak in your bucket again when it comes to customer journey. Okay. So that's mistake number 2 is the weak onboarding. Mistake number 3 is the silence between sessions. Okay. The silence between sessions. If you're selling a physical product, this might mean somebody bought your product, you shipped it to them, and then they didn't hear from you again until you had another product to sell. If this is you as a coach, this might be somebody signed up for your program, you got on their kickoff call, but they don't hear from you again until your renewal conversation because you have automated emails going out. Because most people think that when clients sign and then they get the deliverables or the resources, that that's all they have to do. And then we ghost. And we're seeing this rampant in the market right now. We have for years, but it's really, really ramping up right now because it's such a low trust market right now because people have been so transacted with. And so when you have low engagement between sessions, meaning there's few check-ins, you're not communicating, you're not sending a text message, you're not sending a personal email, you're not checking in to see if they got the resources off the call, you're not just saying, hey, happy Monday, how are you? It's really one of the biggest red flags and crystal clear that someone's about to cancel or churn. Because when people are in silence, when our customers, when our people we're leading are in silence, they see it as indifference. What they internalize is they're just a number. They're just an invoice. They're just a dollar sign. So if we're very, 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 let me choose my words wisely. If we are very, just allow it to go and go with the flow, and we don't intentionally lead, we don't intentionally guide, and we allow that indifference, we are basically destroying relationships. So if somebody feels like they're just an invoice, it's because it feels transactional. And what really starts to shift that is when you have clients or when you have people using your products, that you create accountability, that you create a relationship between deliverables. And I'm not saying you have to be best friends with everybody, right? But it's like if you own a gym membership and you walk into the gym, it's like once you got a membership, imagine every time you went and checked in, they ignored you. You said good morning, they didn't respond. You scanned your key card, they wouldn't talk to you. They would never do that. What happens is you become a member of the family, right? You become a member of that gym, and you might have a membership, but they greet you. They check in with you. They ask how your weekend was. They're like, how is Fido, your dog? I saw you walking. It's those relationship touch points in between the sessions that build loyalty, that build community. And remember what I said at the beginning of the episode, build that feeling of being home that makes people want to stick around. Feeling home is what fuels retention. Okay. And then the fourth one I think is really, really important because I see this both with coaches and with physical products. And even when people are asking for like referrals, is everybody waits too long to have the conversation. So one of the things that we're seeing in the market right now, and I'll cover this in another podcast, is that everyone is really looking for clear implementable takeaways, right? Not information, not fluff, but like, what am I doing for the next 90 days? What am I doing for the next 6 months? What would it look like 12 months from now? What could we accomplish and why could we accomplish it? And I think this is really, really important because if you wait too long for renewal conversations, or if you wait till somebody runs out of your product before you tell them they need a new one, or let's use those two examples, then eventually they end up moving on and replacing it with something else. Okay. So when we really, really think about this, if you're a coach listening to this, the renewal conversation must happen proactively, but it should almost be happening by default because we're looking at, hey, here in the next 90 days, here's what we're working towards. Here's the progress we've made. Look, you've accomplished this. This is what's next. Oh, look, we accomplished this. This is where we're going. If you sell a physical product, it's like, hey, if you've been taking this and you've been taking this consistently, you should be running out. This might be how you're feeling. This might be what you want to focus on, right? So when we really, really think about it, most of the time, if we're bumping into the mistake of waiting too long for the renewal conversation, what's really happening is that we're not actively leading that relationship. We're not actively guiding our clients. The things that they paid us for, right? They didn't pay us for information. We had the information, but they paid us for access and accountability to help them implement that information. We're the personal trainers. And so if we find ourselves waiting too long for that renewal conversation in any bucket, typically it's a red flag that we haven't been leading that relationship. Okay. And so what we have to understand is kind of what happens with people when they are in a journey with us, right? So like if we think about this in a 12-month bucket, okay? We have this mapped out. I have my notes in front of me, and I'm just going to lay this out highly for you to think about. It's a little bit different for every industry, right? But coaches, consultants, even, physical trainers, food people, sometimes even realtors, you're going to be able to listen to this and see it. And even with physical products, we have to understand what happens in like a 12-month cycle with us and why. And I'm just going to explain this to you before I move into a reflection exercise for you to start solving this and become aware of this. Okay. So when we think about why clients leave and how to retain them, we have to kind of understand what's happening in each phase. And so the way that we have this broken down is by months. Okay. So month one, the risk of somebody leaving is very, very high. And what's the root cause? They're having buyer's remorse, unclear expectations, and no early wins. That's month one. That's why they leave and you don't retain them. When you move into month 2 to 3, it is no longer a very high drop off risk, but it's high. It's still high. And why is it high? Because there's slow progress, there's a lack of momentum, and the honeymoon phase is over. So the dopamine's worn off. And if they don't have tangible wins, they can't see that they've made progress. They haven't lost 2 pounds in the first 60 to 90 days. They're like, this isn't working. Okay. When we get into month 4 to 5, the drop off risk is moderate. But why would somebody leave then? Because they could feel like they hit a plateau, that their life is being disrupted, or they're having disruptions in their life. And then the novelty is worn off, right? This isn't a new thing. This isn't an easy solution. Now it's this thing I have to do. We think about month 6, drop off risk, high again. And why? Because there's that natural halfway reassessment. This is a giant decision point for people, even if they're in a 12-month contract. Sometimes if they're in a 2-year contract, it's like, but it's been 6 months. 6 months is a decent amount of time for human beings. So we start to renegotiate and reevaluate. Okay. Then when we get into month 7 to 9, it's back down to a moderate drop off risk. But what's the root cause? There's fatigue. They're feeling like the goals are close enough, meaning like I'm almost there. I can just get there the rest of the way on my own. Or they drifted because they've been in the relationship so long, it's kind of been taken for granted. And now they're getting their needs met somewhere else, or they're just not being met. When you think about month 10 to 11, the drop off risk is extremely high because now, depending on your business, you might have clients with pre-renewal anxiety. They feel like no next chapter has been discussed. There's no plan on what's next. So now it's going to all of a sudden come in like a wave. And then when we think about month 12, that's very high drop off risk because our contracts are ending. And then if we haven't nurtured that relationship, we haven't guided and led that, we haven't let milestones out, we haven't supported people, the default is going to be stopping without a proactive renewal. And so what we have to do is we have to know if a client comes into our ecosystem and let's say they're there for 12 months, where are they? What do they experience? How do I proactively lead this relationship to not commit the mistakes? And then where are they dropping off? Because that's my starting point. That's actually what we're covering at the entire event in Montana, but I'm going to give you the reflection framework now. And I'm going to give you a couple of questions to ask yourself, and I want you to write these down because this is where we're going to land the episode in the show. If you come to Montana, this is what we're going to be mapping out, but going in depth, like every single touch point. But I want you to take some time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever. But ask yourself these questions, okay? And these questions are broken down into just 5 clear categories. There's onboarding, progress visibility, communication, the halftime check-in, and renewal strategy. Okay. And I'm going to just give you a couple of questions and fill in your own. If you get tickled, if you're like, I should talk about this or I should answer this question, you know your business better than I do. You know your clients better than I do. Okay. So when it comes to onboarding, number 1, does my client know exactly what to expect in month 1, month 3, month 6, and month 12? Question 1. Did I create a fast win in the first 7 to 14 days? And number 3, did I give a clear roadmap for the first 90 days? This is what you're going to be learning. This is what I'm going to be coaching you. This is what we're going to be building. So that's onboarding. So answer those 3 questions. Progress visibility. 2 questions. Can my clients see how far they've come? Is there a dashboard? Is there something I'm reminding them of calls? Is there something I'm showing them? And then question 2, am I tracking and celebrating milestones, or am I just delivering sessions? Am I tracking and celebrating milestones, or am I just delivering sessions? Bucket number 3, communication cadence. Question 1, what happens between our calls? What happens between our calls? And the most important question under communication, is there a system for touch points between our calls or sessions, or does silence fill the gap? Is there a system for touch points, or does silence fill the gap? Bucket number 4, the halftime check-in. Whether your clients are there for 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, do I have a structured conversation at the halfway point to re-energize the relationship and reestablish goals? Do I have a structured conversation at the halfway point to re-energize the relationship and reestablish goals? And then number 5, renewal strategy. Am I proactively positioning the next step before the contract ends, or am I waiting and hoping that they renew? So if you take the time to rewind this and go backwards. We don't rewind VHS tapes anymore, but go backwards and listen to these questions again. These reflection questions are the starting point for how we fix it and build it. And we start really at kind of the bottom to the top. So if you have existing coaching clients and you haven't checked in with them halfway, or you're not communicating clearly, then you put that in first. And then you add progress visibility, and then you go to onboarding. And so you want to fix this from the back to the front, just like you want to build retention first before you acquire new leads. And so you want to make sure that you go through this. And if you listen to this whole episode and you haven't figured out that retention is the secret to scaling, I don't have any hope for you. I love you. I'll have a conversation with you, but you have to understand retention is it. It's everything. Doesn't matter which way you slice it. And so in order for retention to happen, you have to adjust to the market, which is shifting now because people are screaming for relationships. They're screaming for accountability. They're screaming for these measurements and these things that we're talking about. And so make sure that if any of these mistakes landed for you, the misaligned or mismatched expectations, the weak onboarding, the silence between sessions, the waiting for the renewals, or you realize that a lot of your clients are dropping off in month 3 or month 6 or month 9 and those landed, take these reflection prompts, write down the answers for yourself, and then go solve them. Go put them into practice and then keep iterating them, because relationships are going to grow in our business. All of these things we have to constantly be updating and nurturing because our job is to lead people and guide people. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today, is understanding that retention is the secret. And it's a very, 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 very prevalent conversation right now. It has been for years, but now the market's forcing it. And so if you want to keep your business the same and sustain it, you still need retention. If you want to scale it, you still need retention. And so if I can help you with this in any way, shoot a message, reach out. But I would love to invite you. We're capping the event at 20 in Montana. Just go to mindofgeorge.com/event. All the details are there. We are going to be spending 3 days building, mapping customer journeys, the retention customer journeys, the onboarding customer journeys, the acquisition customer journeys, and everything that you need in today's market. And so I hope you have a beautiful day. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms. I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.